Hello, George Rusty Cat here, aka Nico Vermilion, or Nico if you prefer, and this will be my third video on Davo's video about emulating Undertale. Now, I already went through his introduction in points 1, 2, and 3. Now, much like my last video, what I'm going to go about on point 4 will also kind of mesh with previous points, namely point 2, which is what he says is make the characters annoying, which is an odd choice, which again, like I said a few times, is a curious choice of words. I would not call it making the characters annoying, but rather making the character quirky. Now, granted, I do understand why, because a lot of people do find character quirks annoying. You know, even if they don't, there's still going to be some sort of character with a certain quirk that just annoys you. And the thing is that I don't think you should make a character annoying, but that's not what he was going about. What I think he was going about was making the characters quirky. And this is something that I would agree with simply because even if it is an annoying trait that makes the character quirky, I would say to go for it simply because it defines the character. It does fall back into the the abstract point, his second point in the video, where he talks about having the attacks be an indication of what kind of what the character is, and which also goes back to my point of having the soundtrack match how the character is. Adding quirks, even if they are annoying quirks, actually fleshes out characters. It rounds out characters. I mean, yeah, you can have a character where you got say, okay, this is their virtue, this is their vice, their positive traits, their negative traits, and that's all fine and good. But a lot of times when people do that, there is this problem that I do notice with a lot of games. They're like, well, here's their positive traits, here's their negative traits, and that's about it. And even when doing that, the characters still feel flat, shallow, uninteresting. Sometimes even characters that I myself can't really stand because it's like, is that all there is to this character? But if you make them quirky, add something that's even if it's something as minor and unimportant, such as enjoys collecting shoes and whatnot. I mean, it's a strange thing, but it does make the character more interesting. You know, I mean, even with outside of games, with home stuff, for example. Fans of home stuff, or even anyone like myself who's at least familiar with it, knows that certain characters have what's called their typing quirks. And this basically correlates to how they are, such as well, okay, right now I'm having a bit of a brain fart. My apologies. But yeah, I mean, have a certain quirk about the character that makes them interesting. I mean, even in anime, when it comes to what's called the moe characters, basically the super cute girls and whatnot, there's always some sort of quirky trait with them that makes people love those characters, and that's the kind of thing that I honestly do believe should be within an RPG. You know, I mean, I hate how there were a lot of times I pick up an RPG, I go to play, and it's like, okay, character is X, Y, Z, and you can tell they are this type and that type, and it's like, why? I wanted something different instead of a same thing, different story kind of situation, which is what usually happens. But when you have those quirks that differentiate the character, it does it at the very least makes the character more interesting. even if it's a character you do not like. So I would not call it making the characters annoying, but rather making the characters quirky. But I do understand why he would say that because, as I said, quirky characters can be annoying. And although it's generally not a good idea to leave a negative feeling on your audience, at the same time, if it's not constant and it's something that helps differentiate what that character is in the audience mind, usually they will be grateful for what they were presented with. Now, on to his fifth point. The whole thing making it where it's a game that make you do it. This one was rather. This one at first I didn't understand until I'm still not too sure I fully understand, but why he would call it that. Well, sorry about that. Why he would say make it a game where you have to do it, make you do it. I'm not too sure why he would say that either. My apologies on this. But the point he tries to make, I had to agree with, Make it where you're presented with what you can do and then you just do it, as opposed to the whole thing of what we actually do see way too much in every sort of video game out there, where it's like, here are the tutorials. Please play through the tutorials in order to understand how our game works. I mean, I like that he brought up the example with the Rubik's Cube and games like Tetris. Like, you could tell what you're supposed to do just by looking at it. Okay? Rubik's Cube, colors get mixed up. It's pretty obvious, To play with the Rubik's Cube is to basically get the colors back to how it's organized. And with Tetris, it's pretty obvious. Well, for the most part, it's obvious that you want the pieces to line up. And when you see something like you're getting points for blocks lining up and whatnot, then stuff like that, it just makes it more obvious. I mean, and even with what he said, he even made reference of with Super Mario Brothers, which actually goes into what Shigeru Miyamoto had said in his interview with how it was intentionally set up. You have the first enemy, to avoid the enemy, but then you have everything set up in a way where there's a mushroom in one of the blocks, and it seems like you're gonna wind up hitting the mushroom anyways. But that is the way to teach a player that, hey, this is something that's gonna help you, We don't really see that sort of thing when it comes to game design these days. It's just, okay, here's the rules. You're going to go through a tutorial to understand the rules. Now, follow the rules. And it's like, as opposed to just making it obvious of what you just do. Or designing a stage so this way you have to do it in a specific way that's actually obvious. That is a point that I can agree with. And who knows, maybe that's what it is, exactly what he meant by make you do it, And this doesn't just apply with RPG, this also applies with many other games out there. Because, as I said, I noticed it in a lot of fighting games and whatnot. Well, not fighting games, but in a lot of platformers, adventure games, RPGs. There's a lot of games out there that I am just not as interested in because it does feel like it can at times feel rather insulting. So, yeah, I would have to agree. The whole point of making it where the player just does it. At least I think that's the point he was trying to get at. But yeah. And that's basically all the points that was made in regards to Undertale. I do apologize if my ramblings in this video and previous videos on where I disagree come out harsh. I don't intend to do that. I just want to say, here's where I agree with, here's where I disagree with. Um, and I do think that a lot of these elements that we've seen in Undertale, such as pacifist runs and negotiations within an RPG storytelling, the story changing depending on what you do in the game. I mean, which is something I've seen practiced a little in games like Fantasy Star 3. I've actually seen that practiced in a little bit, and one another game I played, freeware platformer called EG, IJI if you just want to look it up. That game you have that's another game where you have genocide run and you have pacifist run, and what you do in the game affects a whole lot of stuff. Although, granted, you're not a true pacifist because you do have to destroy machines, but you don't have to kill anyone in EG, and that's basically kind of what we have in Undertale as well. You know, only difference, granted, being that EG is a platformer with level up options as opposed to Undertale, which is basically an RPG. But still, like, it's the same thing. Like, you got pacifist options and you got the option of killing, but you don't have to kill. And you can even make brief alliances. Something that doesn't seem to be a thing with Undertale, but at the same time, I don't think it was necessary to begin with. From what I see with Undertale, I'll find out should I ever get around to actually playing it. But I mean, with EG, like, there's one point where you have a couple points rather, where you have a brief truth. Sorry, this is a bit of a spoiler. Not too much of a spoiler, though, but you get a brief truth with certain characters, and then, and you wind up skipping certain boss fights just because of that in EG. Not sure if Undertale will do the same thing or not, but I do like that option. And like I said, when I brought up Fantasy Star 3, even though there's a lot of people who didn't like Fantasy Star 3, I like that you had different boss battles and whatnot depending on which characters get married. And although it wasn't executed all that well for so many reasons of Fantasy Star 3, it was still something that was nice and interesting. But yeah, these are elements I've seen in previous games that I love, that I wish are in more games. I'm actually glad to see many of these elements executed, some of which executed in different ways in Undertale from what I see of other people's playthrough. So should we make use of these elements more often? Absolutely. And I think that is the point that David was trying to get at, which is we should go into using these elements. And I hope that it does happen. I do hope, however, that these games don't get ignored, because as I said in the first video in regards to the first point, I do hope that when people argue over semantics, because that will happen, I do hope that the argument over semantics does not interfere with the success of any games that try to make use of these elements. So that is it. My apologies if my own quirks annoyed you. And thank you for watching.